have the president of the bar, Dr. Francis Alexis, here to have a little chat with us. Morning, Dr. Alexis. How are you doing?
I'm on top of the world.
Oh, you're on top of the world?
Yes, I am.
Nice.
That's a good response.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the most positive response I've ever had on the show so far.
Good.
Yeah.
Just out of wall, list.
Yeah.
These mornings.
All right, welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
joining
much
us.
indeed. My pleasure. My honor.
How are you doing this morning? Is this too early for you?
Not at all. I'm up 4 o'clock usually, if not before.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. We're going to use a wake-up call in the morning. Okay. Now, what is the latest from the Bar Association? I understand that you have a big event coming up. Tell me about that.
Monday coming, the day before anniversary of our independence, the Grenada Bar Association is organizing the 12th Sir Archibald Ned Memorial Lecture. Sir Archibald Ned was the Chief Justice of Grenada, 1979 to 1986. He was a judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court from 1973 to 1979. He was a magistrate in Nigeria. In fact, he lived in Nigeria for about 25 years. He was also an island scholar here in Grenada. So we have organized this lecture in memory of his honor to encourage young people to understand that we have role models in Grenada, in the Caribbean, role models whom they can attempt to emulate, to imitate. Also, Sir Archibald Ned was not just a legal scholar, he was a social functionary. That is why, for example, in these lectures in his name, we try to get not only lawyers, but the man who will be delivering the lecture on Monday coming is the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus, Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Hamid Ghani.
Okay. All right, good.
And what is he going to be discussing? Do we know? Or?
Yes, we very much know. His topic comes out of what is happening in the Caribbean. We had problems with the, I call it, the Chief Justice in Trinidad and Tobago accepting a Queen's Counsel award. We've had problems in Grenada with the cabinet. Ministers are being moved and they're not turning up to take their oath. Ministers are being fired. He is a specialist, Dr. Ghani, on conventions of the Constitution. He's a Constitution reform expert. He has been leading the process in Trinidad and Tobago. He was very much involved in the exercise in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And his concentration is the role of conventions in shaping the Constitution. You would recall last year or so in Jamaica, there was a problem having to do with the extradition of a Jamaican. Many lives were lost. The issue then was, what is the convention saying about the performance of a prime minister in this situation? Is he responsible for what has happened? So that Dr. Ghani's topic will be informed by current events in the Caribbean in the context of constitution reform going forward in the Caribbean. So his topic is challenges facing Caribbean constitution reform. He has a great personality. You really enjoy seeing him and listening to him.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds very interesting. This is Monday, you said?
This is Monday coming. Okay. Next Monday right here, 7 o'clock. St. George's University, Bourne Lecture Hall. St. George's University has been, so to speak, partnered with us in the Grenada Bar Association, putting on these lectures because they recognize that this is a public facility, so to speak. We get nothing out of it other than encouraging people to debate what is going on in our community. It's a, as I say, public exercise. And so St. George's University has been very kind to us. They open to us all their facilities. they give us the best facilities they have for this lecture, and we really appreciate that.
All right, so on Monday, if you're interested in that, head down to SGU 7
7
o'clock.
p.m.
At 7 p.m. All right, now we want to take this home a little bit, and I want you to tell us how important you think constitution reform is to Grenada specifically, not just the Caribbean wide.
The constitution reform is absolutely important to Grenada. You will recall that this constitution has indeed been put through a revolution. Incidentally, over in Havana, as we speak now, they are talking about, quite interestingly, constitution reform to do what, among other things? To impose term limits on the president of Cuba. Yes, you hear me correctly. To impose term limits, to say that the president of Cuba, whether it's Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, any other Castro, or anybody else, should not serve for more than 2 terms. They're talking about more wide-ranging constitution reform. And it is, as I say, a matter of interest that we have gone through a revolution here. By virtue of that fact alone, the Constitution has been, in that context, damaged. Its integrity has been put into question. We have issues regarding term limits for the Prime Ministership. We have issues regarding, should we have 2 houses of Parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate, or should we have 1 House of Representatives, in which you can have elected members and senators, nominated members. There is the issue for constitution reform in this country having to do with the Caribbean Court of Justice. We need to move out of the Privy Council, in my respectful humble submission, and move into the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. We have to ask ourselves in Grenada, are we going to continue to be subjects of Her Majesty, or are we going to become like in Dominica, like in Trinidad and Tobago, an independent republic? Well, when I was going to school in Grenada in the 60s, our vision, our understanding of a republic was that this is a place in which if you have a dispute with anybody, you just shoot them, they're dead, and that's the end of it.
Right,
no, we know that's not what a republic is about. A republic is about instilling confidence in yourselves, respect for yourselves, and not looking to Her Majesty, gracious as she is, to be your head of state, but recognizing one of your own as your own head of state, thereby giving a sense of self-respect to your people. These are some of the issues for constitution reform.
Okay. Now, tell us about the power of the Prime Minister and the operation of the cabinet. Is the cabinet supposed to be a democratic institution, or does the Prime Minister have full control?
You have to separate the strict theory of constitutional law here from the practice of the Constitution. In the strict theory, in the Westminster model government, we practice it across the Commonwealth, including Grenada. In the cabinet, you don't take a vote. You don't put it to a vote. There is a discussion, and the Prime Minister, as chairperson of the cabinet, catches the consensus and announces the consensus. He says, for example, the issue before the cabinet now is, are we going to grant a casino license to operate on the Esplanade in St. George's? It is debated. After the debate, the Prime Minister says, I think that the consensus is that no, we're not going to grant the license. No casino gambling under my watch. If he catches the consensus wrongly, and other members of the cabinet feel strongly enough about it, they will speak up right there and then and say, Mr. Prime Minister, I think you got a consensus wrong this time. If the Prime Minister insists that that is what I've heard, you have a stalemate there. So that while in theory under the Constitution, the Prime Minister catches the consensus, and that is really the end of the matter, by settled conventions regarding the operation of a cabinet in the Westminster model government, the Prime Minister will put it to the cabinet, is this what we are thinking? And get the response of his colleagues. It is said in this system that the Prime Minister is first among equals. In fact, that is not so. The Prime Minister has no equal in the cabinet. He is technically above the other ministers. But to prevent the system being mismanaged, as it were, we have these conventions that, although in strict theory the Prime Minister catches the word of the cabinet, the proper convention is that nonetheless a wise Prime Minister will listen carefully and properly to what his or her cabinet colleagues are saying. So my answer to your question in a nutshell is you have to distinguish between the strict theory of the Constitution on the one hand and the convention of the Constitution operating properly. If you're confining it to the strict theory of the Constitution, yes, under cabinet government, the Prime Minister's word is final. But in a proper working of the Constitution, a good Prime Minister will resonate with the general thinking among his colleagues, his or her colleagues in the cabinet.
Okay.
Interesting.
Right.
That's not a yes or no answer, but
But I follow you. I understand what you're saying.
All right, you were speaking about cabinet members. So what we want to know is, should non-elected cabinet members, or do they have the same power or authority as elected members?
across the Caribbean, across the Commonwealth, cabinet consists of both elected members of parliament and nominated members. The first constitution we had in the Caribbean in an independent setting, that of Jamaica, was written in such a way that only elected members were to have portfolios. But that has since been changed, and no other constitution in the Caribbean ever had that kind of provision. There may be provision limiting the number of nominated members or senators who might have portfolios or responsibilities in the cabinet. In any event, both elected and non-elected members may properly be in the cabinet.
Okay. And does that not go against the will of the people at the electoral process?
Not at all, because the will of the people is that those elected members of parliament who are in the majority are to run the country, not necessarily by themselves. If you take even the head of state, Her Majesty, represented here by the Governor General, the Constitution allows the Governor General to operate either through himself or through persons subordinate to him or her. Equally, when the Constitution itself provides for senators, you can't turn around and say that it is unconstitutional to have senators being in the cabinet, because that is what the Constitution itself provides for. The Constitution spells it out that to be in the cabinet, you have to be either an elected member of parliament or to be a senator. So that what the Constitution provides for cannot be heard to be described as unconstitutional.
Okay. All right. Just a quick side question. Do you feel that everyone across the board feels that there's a need for constitutional reform?
It would be presumptuous of me to say what everyone thinks, but I would wager that by and wide, largely, a great number of people feel that there is a need for constitutional reform. The questions you're putting to me, for example, about the operation of cabinet government. Should the Constitution say that cabinet should take decisions on a majority basis and not leave it simply to the Prime Minister to catch the consensus?
Right.
Should that be a matter for constitution reform? And that is exercising the minds of a great number of people, at least in Grenada, and not only in Grenada, from time to time across the Caribbean. And if you go back again to the extradition affair in Jamaica, his successor in office attempted during the election campaign just gone in Jamaica to say that, yes, I was in the cabinet, but I was only a, so to speak, junior member of the cabinet. But the present Prime Minister of Jamaica said quite properly during the campaign, no, you can't eat your cake and have it. You were in the cabinet, and by the doctrine of cabinet collective responsibility, even though you were not the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, a most senior ranking minister, you were in the cabinet. And by the doctrine of cabinet collective responsibility, you were as responsible as the Prime Minister for the loss of lives and the damage to property. Having regard to all of those matters, the good questions you're putting to me here, for example, they all go to show that there is a need for serious constitution reform, not only in Grenada, but across the Caribbean. I was involved in constitution reform exercises in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it was rather unfortunate that very noble principles put there, for example, to move St. Vincent and the Grenadines from being under Her Majesty to being under a president of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to move St. Vincent and the Grenadines from the Privy Council to the CCJ, and notice the British themselves are clearly signaling to us across the Caribbean, we have overstayed our welcome in the Privy Council. I mean, they have downgraded the physical facilities in which the Privy Council operated. They themselves have moved away from the House of Lords to a United Kingdom Supreme Court, answering the call for reform in their own societies. The Scots themselves are talking nowadays about, the word is not really seceding, but reviewing their relationship inside the United Kingdom. Right. Constitution reform is an inevitability, I mentioned a minute ago or so. Right in Havana itself, they're moving from Moncada to the Bay of Pigs, right across the Havana when they're talking about constitution reform. When they are doing that, I can unashamedly talk about constitution reform. Not that I need the authority to do so, but I'm illustrating the point that constitution reform is part of life. As you grow up, you grow older, you have different needs. Yes, you have the same basic needs, but your needs become varied now.
Right. Okay. All right, and tell us about the Caribbean Court of Justice. What's your view on it? How does it impact the average man?
The Caribbean Court of Justice is demonstrating that it has the ability, the competence to answer questions which have not been answered before. For example, the question, if a person has been serving in the cabinet, misuses his or her authority, sells land to his or her family cheaply, and then demits office, can the new government hold him or her accountable personally in civil law as distinct from criminal law? No other court across the Commonwealth has answered that question until the CCJ was asked to answer the question earlier this year, and they answered the question. Now, issue is not, are you in agreement with the answer given? So often in law, especially in public law, so often in public activities in a democracy, it is not really a question of whether you agree with me or not. Rather, the issue is, has the matter been properly aired? So everybody has been given a chance to give his or her view. And does the answer given comport with a general sense of justice and fair play? You have a wide room in which to maneuver. And they gave an answer. They have answered the question, if a state signs up to a treaty especially a treaty impacting upon human rights, the right to life. But nonetheless, the state does not take time to pass legislation making the treaty part of a national law. Does that treaty nonetheless bind the state so that a private individual can claim it? They have answered that question. To me, inevitably, one of these days, the Privy Council will tell us goodbye anyhow. It is therefore only a matter of time before all of us in the Caribbean have to accede to CCJ. The second part of your question is it impacting upon the common man? The Privy Council doesn't impact upon the common man, never has. The access to the Privy Council is very limited. For you to get to the Privy Council, you have to have a lot of finance and economic resources. You have to pay the airfare to get there. You have to pay the hotel bills there. You have to pay high-priced lawyers there. And even if you're taking lawyers from the Caribbean, you have to do that too. If you go to the CCJ in Trinidad and Tobago, it's right next door. Not only that, they have facilities for teleconferencing. And you can do a whole case by teleconferencing. Moreover, the decisions they have been giving so far will impact upon the ordinary man. Access to treaties, I just mentioned, a sense of fair play in how people operate in the cabinet, and not raid the public treasury or seize the government lands for their family and friends. More and more you will find that the CCJ will be impacting upon the ordinary man. But each country in the Caribbean has to accept the CCJ as its final appellate court, replacing the Privy Council before the CCJ can fully impact upon the ordinary man.
All right, Dr. Alexis, this is a huge topic, and of course you can go for the entire morning talking about this. But before we leave, one more time, you want to mention that event?
Yes,
so,
please.
At SGU?
At the St. George's University, True Blue, Bowen Lecture Hall, 7 p.m. Monday coming. Dr. Ghani delivering the Sir Archibald Ned Memorial Lecture, very prestigious lecture. You may remember last year, the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Sir Sridhar Ramphal, delivered it. We have had people like Prime Minister Kenny Anthony, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves deliver the lecture, and we assure you that Dr. Ghani is right up in that echelon there.
Okay.
Actually, is there a fee for the
No,
lecture?
no.
Okay.
Entirely free. In fact, we'll give you a little refreshment afterwards too.
All right. Okay.
All right, good stuff. So, all right, once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and then sharing.
At the Grenada Bar, I want to thank you in this program for having us and giving us so much exposure. We deeply appreciate that.
All right, you're welcome. On behalf of the Daybreak team,
Good.
All right,
Thank
folks.
you very much.
That was Dr. Francis Alexis talking to us about constitutional reform.